Hi, my name is Benedict for Higher Hertz. I've had sort of fairly late night and a big day already doing some work, but I need to get this one done fairly quickly because I have a 4-day turnaround maximum. So I got to get this done. We are looking this time at Autochroma by a small dev called something like Imagiro. I'm not sure whether that is imago, as in like face. I'm not sure what that means. Doesn't really matter. The device is called Autochroma. It seems to be his first larger device. There's a sort of lo-fi piano type thing. This one is interesting. Normally, I'm not a massive fan of this sort of grain effect kind of thing. And I'll be honest, I'm not sure that I'm a buyer of this, but I think that he's got some things pretty right about this, which, if you are interested, this is, as he suggests, somewhat easier to work than similar sorts of contenders. Bearing in mind I haven't tried every grain kind of thing, but a lot of them I try are just like, oh, this is unfriendly. This is more friendly than most. There are still some things that you're going to have to get your head around. Now, here is a piece that I prepared earlier. It's terrible. But when we look at the A-B, the sense of, okay, this is what it sounds like when this is on as opposed to off, will give you a sense, and then we will look into the device itself. So here's my wonderful piece of music. We've got Hertz delay, doing a little bit of reverb duty, just so everything doesn't sound dry. And to be fair, there's a little bit of sawtooth saturation knob, just to put everything together. So now if I start bringing these in, pad really breaks up. This is that electric piano and the drums. I'm letting this run so you get a feel for it over time. See that it's spawning playback taps, sort of like delays, but not quite as logical. Again, it would bypass. Very flat, so if we pop this in solo, the levels aren't the same between the two. Yeah, that makes a really nice enrichifier of on. Okay. This electric piano. Interesting. And these drums. Pretty, yeah, loop. Adding extra bits and pieces, including some backwards bits and pieces. So we get quite a big difference from off to on. That's all I want you to hear or take on board at that point. We will delete all of these. Yes, it will keep going. Now, Imagiro, or however it is pronounced, is a small developer. He's a musician. He's got a few albums, what have you, of his own on Bandcamp. It's all sort of in that kind of lo-fi kind of thing, but it seems well done. It's all complete. It's got covers. No titles on the covers of some of them, which is a bit of a no-no in my book, but it's all there. And this seems to be the kind of device that he obviously wanted to use, or maybe has used, but you can hear similar sorts of things going on in his work. So it's probably a case of building a tool for himself, which means that it's either useless for everyone else or going to work really well for people who are trying to get similar sorts of results. Great. In terms of price, it's $40, which is, I think, very fair. Because you'd often expect with something like this to be paying quite a bit more. It's a pretty early version, but there's nothing about it that I have found to be non-functional, non-reasonable, and generally overall it's very logical. On the bit just below this screen, it says about how a lot of these grain devices are uncomfortable to use. They're obtuse, dense, and he wanted to make one that was fun. As for fun, well, I don't get a lot of fun out of grain, but I think that he has achieved far more of that than he has not. So in terms of if that's the stated aim of the device, I'm going to say, yeah, dude, I think you're on a winner. What it is if you look at his picture there, you'll see 3 streams, is 3 grain playback effects. You can think of them as being like delay, reverby, chorusy things, but spitting out sound out of a buffer in kind of all over the place kind of thing, as you heard with particularly the electric piano and the drums, where they were doing stuff going going backwards and stuff like that. So you can have up to 3 streams working all at once, and visually it makes far more sense than it doesn't, which is, as he indicates, and I have indicated, kind of ahead of most of them. So for the price, it's not the everybody's using this kind of FabFilter Pro Q whatever this week. It is a character device. I'm always a fan of character devices, the thing that not everybody else is using, because you're far more likely to end up with results which are unique. I know many people are horrified of the thought of being unique as an artist, but you need to be unique. Otherwise, how can you stand out against everybody else who's trying to be exactly the same as everybody else? You need to have something that makes people go, and that's worked for me, even though I'm not really big on this kind of thing. I saw this and I thought, this is worth a look. That's kind of cool. Played with it, and it's like, this actually works. So rather than me being told, hey, this is next on your list, I said, please, sir, can I have this one on my list? Because I think it's a quiet winner. Alrighty. So I'll run through my goods and bads on the device. These are, of course, my opinions from having used it for a relatively short period of time. The goods are, I think that it's a really quite charming and interesting character device. This is good because, as I said, we need character in what we do. It is, as indicated on the tin, a reasonably easy to use grain effect. There are some not so easy to understand things about it, but grain is not as simple as delay or an echo where you go hello and hello, hello. That's very easy to understand. Grain, you can say hello and blah, 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 beep, blah, 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 beep, boop, boop, bop, come that. That's a non-linear process. It's an insane process. So understanding it takes a little bit of stepping outside of the hello, echo, echo, echo kind of thing, which is super obvious. So within that, it's reasonably easy to use. And as I said, I think the price is very, very fair. It's possibly very cheap, but one of the problems these days for a developer is that there's so much free stuff, and there's so much stuff on iFads and the like that is like $2, that it's queered the whole market for the thinking that, well, a device like this, it might realistically be 80, 120 or whatever for the amount of time and effort that it takes to make it and make it work and make it nice to use. That's worth something if that's the value you're going to get from it. But it's a queered market, so I think 40 is actually a very fair price. It's not stupid cheap. It's not expensive as such at all. Bads, to be fair. There is no RTFM that I could find at all. Now, I've mostly worked out how to make it fly without. So as such, that's fine. There is a video, and he kind of says, oh, well, once you get this, then the rest will kind of become evident over time. Dude, it's evident to you, but is it going to be evident to the average user who picked this up? I'm not your average user because I got 30 plus years behind me. Fair enough, very little in grain, but I have used grain devices before. There's one in Reason, not that does this, although I do actually have one in Reason, but it's not as pretty as this. So a beginner picking this up, I guess you can argue and say, well, they'd never RTFM anyway. Well, that's more fool them. But I think a better manual would probably help. Maybe this will help in that sense as well. Because, as I've said, there are some things about grain that are essentially confusing because it's a non-linear process. It's a slightly crazy process because you put something in and something comes out and it can do this sort of stuff, which is, how do you get your head around being able to comprehend that? Other than just going, oh, well, I'll just randomly wiggle some knobs and yeah, random stuff will come out. That's not programming. That's just whatever. So lack of manual, lack of explanation does mean it's a bit more confusing than you'd hope for, but at the same time, it's far easier to use than most. So it's far more of a on the good side than the bad side. And the demo is only 4 days. In a sense, I get that because developers are concerned that people are just getting things, using them through that time, and actually taking the results and putting them up for sale. And that's just kind of not cool. But 4 days is okay. If you can't get a sense of, hey, this is going to work for me in 4 days, then yeah, but just choose your run. When you start your run with this, to be a time where you can put some time into it. Don't sort of go, oh, I'll start it and then, go to Hong Kong for 2 weeks and come back and go, oh, I'm screwed now. I don't know whether he's going to be open to resetting, but if he's smart, he'll probably say no to most people who want to reset, because most of the people who ask him will simply be looking for more time to make their master hit that they can make money out of without paying him a cent based on this. Not cool. Just be aware of the 4-day demo. Overall, my opinion is that, remember, I chose to put this up for review, is that I think that it's a charming character device that does what it sets out to do far better than one might initially expect, so it's more wins than losers. Thumbs up from me. Now let's look into the walkthrough. What is the product? How does it work? Well, it works a fair bit like this. We have, and let me just make sure that we've got our MIDI focused on this guy, a sound. Think of it initially as being like a delay or any other effect unit. That's the original sound. And this is the clutter of sounds that I'm having this put out. In no way am I pretending that this is good. You're going to have to work out what is good in your situation. I really liked the embiggening chorusy type thing I had on the pad. I thought the other sounds, what it did was interesting. But this is designed as a patch to show you kind of what we can do with it, and it's up to you then to work out what you're going to do with it in a constructive sort of a way. Now, this is a demo patch that I've got. As you see, we're running 3 streams. They are color-coded, so you can see stream 1, which is green, stream 2, which is red, and stream 3, which is bronze, gold, whatever. 3 different colors, and it's running them all at once. If you don't have all of these on, we can double-click to turn it off, or right-click to enable, disable, then it will just show what is functioning. So if I enable that one, now it just shows 2. That's nice. It doesn't waste space unnecessarily, meaning that you can disable this, work on this one, and then turn it back on again. Cool. That's the sort of overview. There is also a modulation screen, which allows you to grab and drag these things to something else. Relatively common approach to modulation. Seems elegant enough. I didn't spend time to get to all the intricacies of it, but at least to see how it worked. So if we turn off each of these, so that's showing the level, like the volume of the effect. And each of the lines is a tap, a read head. Second one. So providing a a sort of a reverb that sometimes just changes direction. A sort of here today, gone tomorrow, scatter clatter that's pitch shifted an octave up. By putting them all together, obviously we get a real lot of sound. This was not a preset. I just started looking at some presets and lost interest very quickly, because the problem with presets is that while they may show what the device can do, most of these, and nothing against anybody, is that they will have built them around a particular sound, so it has no relevance to my sound. Anyone who knows me knows that I don't think that's the way to use a device, so just to randomly go, I'll... And now I've made some kind of artistic statement. It's not... Venus Theory's stuff does seem like a lot of his stuff that's stylish. Factory stuff perhaps will give you more of a sense of how you might achieve certain styles of things, but I would discourage using them as such. One thing I must say that I have not noticed, and maybe it's here, if we click again that goes away, is a way to, we can copy and paste settings from one stream to another, but I haven't noticed a way to reset, as in like a default patch. So that's one thing that I would say do, unless there's something in here that I'm not, no. So I would like to see a init patch here, because I think it's a bit uncool not to have one, seeing everything is very complex. Not sure, I guess. Oh no, there we go, in user there is an init. It's hidden. I just sort of think I far prefer see it on the front panel. You know, just give me a thing somewhere. I mean, maybe over here or somewhere, anywhere. There's probably dead space here. All right, so there are presets. There is also a thing where you can drag audio off into your sequencer, and quite literally it works. It takes whatever is in your buffer for the last amount of time that it's been recording said buffer, you drag and drop it, whip, drag it out, and it will appear here. So now I've got an audio track. There we go, there's my buffer. There's nothing in my buffer, so it wasn't very exciting, but you can pull your audio buffer out and it will actually display. And that's pretty cool. It really is. It's a slightly unexpected feature, but if you want to say, oh, I was doing that thing, you can actually drag it out, knife down to, yep, that's where it was working, and boom, there you go. In terms of the buffer, this is the center of how things work. I play sound, it goes into the buffer. Now, the first thing you've got to understand, this is not like, you know, those things where you see a stream of audio going past you. This is recording a section of time. So it's said I've got a loop that's X long, and X is malleable, and I will just start and keep recording over. So as you see, it just starts recording from wherever the playhead currently is. And then as it passes through, it overwrites. So if I export the buffer right now, I end up with a combination of what was before and what I've just done. You do need to understand the buffer a little bit better before you sort of find it gets a little confusing. Now you can change the size of the buffer here. This buffer is actually linked to tempo. It's time-based, but it's also linked to tempo. So it will change. Again, an RTFM would help be a little bit more precise and clear on that. We can actually move this, so we can say I've got 1 bar, 2 bar, 3 bar, 4 bar. So I've now got 4 bars at 120 BPM. So if and when I drag this out, it will give me 4 bars at 120 BPM, and so long as I dropped this at the beginning of a bar, then all these bar lines are going to line up. That seems like a pretty cool thing, because I don't think I've ever really seen exactly this feature before, but I would kind of expect that they wouldn't necessarily be as pre-formatted as this. That is a nice thing. You can drag this out. I have no idea how long you can make this buffer. I started dragging it out and made it a lot longer, but I must say I did lose sight of where am I at? What am I doing in terms of size or length of bars or anything like that? So a little bit of info, or possibly some sort of an overview, even if that has to be off on another screen. Not that I like other screens, but that would be handy to be able to very easily say, okay, I want 16 bars or 32 bars. I don't work in 4-bar loops much, but I'm not the main target audience for this. But if you're allowing really long sections, just like Robert Fripp's 2-second guitar thing was just revolutionary at the time, this allows a very different sort of approach, and to open your market to the kooks out there, the John Cages, the Philip Glasses, because get them on board. While the EDM people couldn't give a flying banana peel about them because they don't understand what they're doing, those guys are cool. They're interesting. So this buffer that you can choose the size of it, you can freeze. So I can hold this buffer, or we can mix and match. So as you see, 50% of what was in the buffer is still staying there. It's kind of like a looper in a sense. So that's part of why I sort of think this could be quite interesting for somebody who's a bit innovative in that sort of way, or just guys who are using loopers. Not that I'm a fan of that sort of stuff, but what I do like is, say, this sort of thing. You can set a fairly high, and start building up layers. If it's 100%, unfortunately it doesn't take in anything new. But in this case, if you keep... you've got to balance that, bringing new material, and there may be some advantage in building a more specialized device for that, but generally you'll have your freeze off, so it just automatically overwrites. This set of numbers here is telling you how many grains you have active at any point in time. In this case, we've got 1 out of 150 possible in total, so 50 on this voice, 50 on this voice, 50 on this voice. You can get there. The patch that I had before with the 3 things running, that was running, I think, close to 150 voices. So the buffer is really important to understand. It is not the same as your song just going past. It is a section of time which you can manage, which is just punching or looping round and round. And how you manage how that comes out is what's interesting. They are your modes. So see here your scan modes. Lock. Lock means that the record head and the playback head are essentially in the same place. If we do this, they are in essentially the same place. There's probably some kind of latency, but in all get out, it's close enough. You can hear it's phase flanging ever so slightly, but not enough to be a concern of any kind. So lock is what you will use most of the time as just being, well, I want you to do your cunning stunts based upon where the playhead's at. You've then got vel, which looks to a synthesis like velocity, as in how hard I play the keys. It is the word velocity, but it means we can offset the speed or the rate at which our playback is happening compared to the buffer write. So at 50%, see how it's actually slowing down. So it's giving a weird backwards but not backwards kind of a thing. Or we can speed it up. See how it's running ahead of. And because this buffer loops, it will cycle around at the length of the buffer. If you want, by all means, make the length of your buffer not the same as the length of your loop. So if your track works on a 4-bar loop pattern, you might set your buffer to 5 bars, which means it's going to be moving out of sync. And so this velocity setting means that our read head can move at a different rate from the record head, up to 400 times the speed. And that will change the relationship between the taps as well. And then the last one is position. Remember, this is just recording a loop of tape, so to speak. Notice that this only does its thing when there's audio at that particular point. As to whether we can automate that, that's actually an interesting question. Can I automate that? Let's have a look at my sequencer. That hasn't suggested that I can. Create a track. What, if anything, does it expose? Okay, it does expose them. So it looks like we probably can choose a lot of things and probably automate them. I won't get into that. I probably should have thought to check it, but I was busy playing with it, not working out whether I could automate. But you may be able to move this. You can move the playhead by clicking, which is a little different, or you can drag here. So your position is fixed and your buffer moves around it. Your velocity is running at a different rate from your write head and read head. So it's allowing things to move at a different rate, which sometimes you will find interesting, but locked is probably where you'll start. It's just doing exactly what you think. We've then got placement, and this is the placement of the taps. Remember that grain is kind of like a delay, only it spits the echoes out in a different format. So this one does kind of alter a little bit, and it is not entirely intuitive. So you've got what seems to be the gap between these taps. I'm just setting everything to free. You can see that everything can be set to tempo, but I'm not such a massive fan of that. So this is the length of the grain, which we'll come to in a moment. And this is how many taps we've got, but I'm not sure that it's marked the best way, in the sense that if I say I want 4 taps, I've got to raise this, and then I don't really know whether I've got 4 taps. Now, grain is a very imprecise kind of science, but basically if you want more taps, maybe that's supposed to be the time between taps or something. I'm not sure. So you can make the total placement, like see they're all on top of each other. Spread them right out. And that's how you make a reverb, or the beginnings of a reverb. So you are going to need to take some time to get these so that they feel like they become comfortable. Lock is for, I assume, when changing patches that you can just set something to. Actually, to be honest, I know what this is for. You can set a grid time, and then you can snap these to that grid time. So now they're only spitting out a tap at every quarter note. Yeah, I forgot about this. Or you can mix and match. Now see that they're clustered around that quarter, so they're pulsing per se. Interesting. Because I'm not the kind of guy who does that sort of thing, I can't say how cool or not that is, but it is interesting because people are going to want rhythmic-y kind of stuff. So that's the placement of the it's a placement of the taps. I'm thinking of more like in Blender, where you spit out a whole lot of points and they turn into a whole lot of little dots that bounce around and you do stuff with. This is essentially the same thing. Then there's what happens to these taps over their lifetime. So lifetime meaning this tap, how much audio is it actually reading off the buffer? If it's reading 3.6 milliseconds, okay, that's pretty short. So it will get a bit scruffy. You can go right up to each of these taps reading 3 whole seconds of audio. You can set what percentage of them you want to reverse. So that's playing backwards. Remember, it's not playing from the beginning of the note per se, because that buffer is moving a little differently and all of those taps are picking up in different spots. Or you can set a combination thereof, so you can see that most are going forward and some are going backwards. You could hear that in the initial patch here, but you could definitely hear it in the drums that some of them were going backwards. You can set the shape of each of these taps over time. So it's an envelope and an attack decay of these. And this is a little kooky. You've got one knob that moves over two different ranges at once. So this is really an XY pad. You get used to it. So that's simply, this is the shape of that over the whole period of time. If we do this, you can see them growing and shrinking. And that's how we get those sort of grain clouds. Because it picks up, it swells, it drops down, and each one of those taps is doing that individually based upon the time it instances, as in when it pops out of nothing to when it dies away. So you get that interesting sound. We can then set them to do things so that behaves more like a reverb. Let's go shorter. This isn't, at least I didn't find how to make this automatically make lovely reverbs, but it does make interesting early reflections at least, and things that I would use in a mix. I'd be more likely to use it for this sort of unusual kinds of kinds of reverb. So it's cool in that way. So you can set your shapes however you want them. Easiest to have basically square. You can then change pitch. There are various pitch modes. You can set it to a scale or set it to free. If you set it to a scale, then whatever you set here will be what it allows you to change to. So it's allowing me those notes or those intervals of 1, 4, and then iterations of those. This only changes the whole output, so it doesn't keep cascading upwards. A thing that I would actually have liked, if we could have it that every iteration, like every little tap, potentially, but there may be a reason why that's not easy to do. I do have some pitched delays, like especially with frequency shifters that allow you to go ping and they go and cascade up or down, and they are mostly useless but occasionally very, very cool. And I sort of feel like, oh, if that was included in this it would be cool, but there may be a reason why not. So you can set how you want things to move. So if you want to move just by 12 semitones, that's now an octave up. So if you've got a pad and you want to add some tinklies to it, lovely. That's a way of doing it. You can, of course, also move in free, which is prone to being a little broad, but shift does make it a little tidier. Double click, I didn't mention before, I will reset things. There, I forgot. I don't know what continuous free pitch really does. Oh, maybe that's the thing I'm asking for. No, I don't know what it does. RTF? M, please. So you can set unusual pitchings, which is probably what I would do with the... John Cage is very interested right now. Ooh, that's better than 12-tone music. that's 11.5-tone music. So we can have a fair amount of variety there in how we manage the life of our taps. And then on the output there is a filter. The on switch for the filter is under the filter, which doesn't make a lot of sense, and it uses the same kind of... It's just unusual XY for the high and low passiness of your filter. And it's good to have this on board because you often don't want the grain to be the same as so that gives us a different feel for... There's a spread, which again operates as a pan. And some kind of wide thing. It's not 100% clear. My guess is maybe each of these taps is just spread out somehow. The RTF firm would be nice to explain what to expect there. Now let's say we wanted to automate this. Oh, there is the ability to, because you'll notice sometimes the thing becomes a little... So if we want to change our mix or change our overall output gain, because you commonly lose quite a lot of gain with this, it seems to be worked on the model of trying to keep equal power, but it will get quiet, so you might want to push this up. But at no point should you think that this should automatically gain stage for you, because it can't, and assuming it means that, well, you've been watching too many of the wrong videos. Now, modulation. There is this modulation system. So we can take one of several things, LFOs, envelopes, what have you. Macro, I didn't even look at. Pulse, just takes a pulse and then a random generator. But we'll take an LFO, you can work out what the others do. We can drag this and we'll drop it on our pan. Set that to... These can be set to frequency or free, as in hertz, at least they're hertz. You can change phase, not that that means an awful lot. Let's, oh, they're actually separate. That seems a little backwards, because it says low pass or high pass, and they seem to be the wrong way around, so I don't know. With a lack of visualizer, it's a little harder to see. Exactly what's happening there. And again, the RTFM would clear up whichever it is. I just have a sneaky feeling something might be upside down. It may just be the way it's written. And that basically is how we build a patch. You can obviously do more with this, but there is no specific thing. It's not like a compressor where you're going to essentially get the same kind of style of result by using similar sorts of settings. Obviously, it depends on the input, but this depends so much on the input that saving this off as a patch and then applying it to something else, yeah, okay, technically I'll get the same spread of sand thrashing around in space here, but something that works well for this piece of music probably is totally useless random gibberish for something else. But that's part of the charm, or the whole idea of these sorts of things, is that they're not linear. So if you are looking for that kind of odd, dreamy, lo-fi kind of thing, and you haven't already settled yourself in with a tool that does this kind of stuff, then I think $40 is money very well spent on a device that's capable of so much. And I've only got one instance running here. Let's put these other two back in, which are not necessarily going to match with this at all. So if we just go ears only, a little bit of hertz delay there, pretty bland. Incoherent gibberish, but again, it's just the A-B between this simple sound can turn into this really complex, intriguing, or totally infuriating if you do it wrong, sound. And that's through this device, which is really, I think, very nicely designed, and bar the lack of an RTFM, surprisingly easy to use. It may not do absolutely everything that every grain device does, but it does deliver that feel really nicely and really consistently. If we were to then marry that up with some other things. Let's go with a Hertz box. Let's give it just a little bit of, let's pull some of that out, push that up. Let's actually do a phaser sweep here. So we'll put them, we'll take the drive signal and then what do we want to go long? No, we'll go short. Okay, might even be worth taking this and putting him up here, makes more sense. So that's carrying that into the autochroma, which makes more sense. Let's get delay. Probably not what I would be looking for. Let's drop that. Let's just pull him out. Alright, pop this guy back in. Interesting. And then multiplier. Big spread, big pre-delay. Switch them out. Just want to hear what the original is. This is doing something slightly similar, but it's linear. And box back in. Quite a radical change. And if we pull this guy out, while we've got an interesting sound, it doesn't have that sense of otherworldly beauty, randomness to it, that we're turning that into a kind of a drone. So what we might do is record a pass of my quality playing for a period of time, turn that into a slab of audio, and then take that and stretch it back out or put it back through another similar sort of a process. And once we've done that at time or 47, we're going to have something really not my common style of work, but this is, I think, an integral part of that sort of process if that's the kind of direction that you want to go. So, bottom line, again, I think it's actually a really rather cool tool that you might just need to take a little bit of time to get your head around what it does. Hopefully, there will be some kind of more detailed explanation of just some of the finer points, like I am intrigued by this pitch, continuous repitch. It doesn't seem to give the that I thought maybe that means. I don't notice a difference when I use it. Just little things like that, an RTFM should help me to understand. But failing that, most people who are using these sorts of devices are looking for something a little outside of the box. So I understand the thought that, oh, well, let's not have an RTFM, but for people who want to be in control of the process to get more from it, make one, make a video, you know. Otherwise, it's a super device if that's what you're looking for. And if I had it in my arsenal, I would rarely use it. But if I were making a sound, I'm sort of going, okay, this sound needs to have some of that kind of feel. I've got Grain, but that would mean recording some stuff and putting it through Grain, which is a synth, which is not going to be the same as putting it through this. So it'd be one of those things that I would have rarely use, but once I pulled it out, it would be like, yep, as long as I know what I'm after, I'm going to nail something down with this, and it's going to be unique, and I'm going to be pleased. And then I won't use it again until I feel like I need it for something similar. But there are plenty of people who use it all the time on everything. You just got to know where you sit in that continuum. Alrighty, so Benedict for higher hertz. If you have any questions, not about the device or support, please, because obviously we're not support for them, but just about the program in general, then please subscribe, pop your question below. Once I become aware of it, I will give you the best answer that is viable. Otherwise, you've seen the Hertz devices, so Hertz box, Hertz delay, Hertz multiplier in action. They complement this sort of thing really, really nicely in my mind, because you might have Autochroma locked down all to, absolutely everything might be running in sync to BPM-y kind of stuff. It's like everything can be set to that. In which case, gives you a pretty static sort of result to be expected. And then adding in these, which are the complete opposite. We've got some stuff which is locked to BPM, and some stuff which is clearly not lockable to BPM to give us that big floating sound. Yep, that's it. I'm done. Go out, try this device, but just remember it's only a 4-day demo, so you've got to have your 4 days planned as available before you start your demo. Otherwise, it's going to time out on you, and you will be like, no. But the moment you feel like, yeah, this is a winner for me, then I think you should just part with the $40 if you're going to use it a lot, because I think it's really good buying. Get out there, have fun, have a great day.